Jacob Rees Mogg, the Conservative MP who campaigned to leave the EU, and Sir Vince Cable, the Liberal Democrat and former Business Secretary, who has just been re-elected as the MP for Twickenham. Jacob Rees Mogg, let me start with you. So Robert's saying there that there is some confusion from EU leaders about the state that Britain is in going into this. Are we not just immediately hamstrung by the precarious situation the government is in?
I don't think we are, because Article 50 was passed into law thanks to the valiant efforts of Gina Miller. And that means that with or without a deal, we will leave at the end of March 2019. So now the question is, do we do this smoothly or do we do it abruptly? And there is the beginning of the negotiation. It's fascinating that if you look at the Labour Party manifesto, it was saying that we would be out of the single market and effectively out of the customs union. The Conservative manifesto was explicit on that. The combined vote of the two was over 80%. So the position of the British people hasn't changed since the 23rd of June last year.
Vince Cable, the position of the British people hasn't changed.
Well, it has changed because we had an election and the centre of gravity has moved, and it's very clear there is no longer any support in Parliament, and I would suspect in large areas of the Cabinet, for rejecting a deal altogether. I mean, that option that Theresa May was keen on, I think, is now very much off the table. The three big issues they're talking about at the moment, you know, the issue of money, citizenship and the Irish border, these are very tricky and complex issues, but they're a compared with the much bigger question about whether we stay in the customs union or leave, whether we stay in the single market or leave, and what the single market means. And these are the big things that affect the economy. The government is clearly divided on those issues. There's a different makeup in Parliament, and the government is going to find it very, very difficult to push through the more extreme form of Brexit, which initially they favoured.
So if the general election showed there was no endorsement of a hard Brexit, then it also showed Lib Dems losing their share. There's no endorsement of a second referendum either. So what is the broad public opinion at the moment? Well,
it's changing, and I think the simplest way of characterising it is that there are probably now three broad groups. There are those who are, you know, hardline Brexiteers. There are people who still not reconciled to leaving, and there's a large number in between who've accepted that we've moved on with the referendum but want minimum disruption, who want what in the jargon is called a soft Brexit. Now, whether that's deliverable and how it's deliverable within the very short time frame is very much open to debate.
Jacob Rees Mogg, how do you respond to the idea that there was, now this is more in the hands of Parliament, but there were no cross-party talks before David Davis went to Brussels? Was this premature?
No, of course not. We have to get on with the government of the country. We have a separation between our executive and legislative branches. That's a very long-standing nature. The executive gets on with the details of negotiation and is held to account by Parliament. That's how it's always happened. And our Prime Minister is the person who commands a majority in the House of Commons. And as long as Mrs May continues to do that, she is the Prime Minister, she has the authority to negotiate, she has the confidence of Parliament. And Brexit is actually surprisingly straightforward. It means we're leaving the European Union. That means leaving the single market, which is the major instrument of the European Union, and leaving the customs union, because that will allow us to do our own trade deals and to have cheaper food, cheaper clothing for people up and down the country. It will lead to better living standards for people, and that's a really exciting prize to get from these negotiations.
Surprisingly straightforward. I haven't heard that as a phrase applied to Brexit much.
I think everybody else believes it's unbelievably complicated. But just to highlight that one issue of the customs union, I mean, it's clear that there are very big divisions on that. And the Labour Party, which has supported Brexit, is now saying we must stay in the customs union. I think some members of the Cabinet were there too, because to leave it would have massively disruptive effects on our supply chain industries. I mean, I spent 5 years in the Cabinet promoting the British car industry, the aerospace industry. Now, those industries depend on widgets, you know, going backwards and forwards without any inspection, without tariffs. The idea that we can negotiate attractive new deals that make a difference, I mean, I think has already been disproved. I mean, Mrs May's attempts to get some special deal with India, one of the major emerging powers, I mean, she was simply sent packing because we're not willing to concede the kind of things that matter to the Indians. And if we really want to do more trade in China and India, Brazil, we just get on with it. I mean, the countries like Germany and France are ahead of us in those markets. We don't need negotiated trade deals to do it.
You look keen to interject.
I am indeed, because this is the classic narrow European inward-looking approach. Our supply chains include countries from around the world. We import from all over the world, and we export more to the rest of the world than to the EU. So we have supply chains already with America and with India and with China, and we manage that through our borders with incredible efficiency. Things coming through the port at Southampton speed through with all the customs declarations done before the items are landed, and the final approval is given as they're in the crane going off the ship onto land. This is all in place for other countries. We can do the same with the EU. Leaving the customs union is simple. And there's a great habit of the political class, like the Wizard of Oz, to pretend that there is a great mystery about these things. But actually, they are fundamentally very straightforward. We're leaving the European Union, we will have control of our laws, we will control our borders, and we will make trade deals with the rest of the world.
The EU don't want to make this easy for Britain. They want to set an example so that others don't follow suit. When you couple that with the weaker position that we have going into this, what's your prediction for how all this is going to pan out? Is this going to be a complete unmitigated disaster?
Well, if I was one to be a doom monger, I would say the potential for disaster is actually quite large. But there is another option. I mean, I think one of the things that's opened up in the last few days is the European Union says, if you want to drop all this Article 50 stuff, you know, and just go back to where we were, there isn't a problem. And that's something they haven't said before. And I think that the more difficult it gets and the more complex it gets, I think we're going to have to look at a wide range of options now, and it may just include pocketing most of the status quo.
St Vince has let the cat out of the bag. The people who are calling for a soft Brexit don't want us to leave. They want the Article 50 process to be quietly knocked on the head. The British people voted to leave. They would be cheated if we didn't, and our democracy would not be respected. It would be a deep scandal, and that the EU is suggesting it shows the contempt the EU has for democracy, and is why it made other countries vote until they gave the right answer. The British people aren't like that.
Well, they just had an election which shifted the balance in a quite radically different way.
Over 80% of people voted for leaving the single market and the customs union. The Labour Party said very little on Brexit because they knew it was popular. The Lib Dems, the Scottish nationalists, opposed Brexit, and they saw their vote decline.
We'll have to end it there, Jack.